Hello and welcome to Faith in Action, the podcast from the Christian Institute that aims to equip believers like you to put your faith into action and also to give you a bit of an insight into what goes on here at the CI. If you like this podcast, please do subscribe on the platform of your choice. And if you aren't already a CI supporter, please do join us at the.ci/sign up. But let me turn now to today's guest, Dr. Sharon James, Social Policy Analyst here at the Institute. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here.
There's a lot to get into. I really want to dig into the work that you do and the things that you're passionate about here at the Institute. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say congratulations. It seems as though you've had quite a lot going on in the past few weeks. 40th wedding anniversary, another grandchild. You must be over the moon.
Thank you. Just overwhelmingly thankful. It's been a wonderful journey. I've been married to my wonderful husband 40 years, now 10 grandchildren, 5 little granddaughters, 5 little grandsons. We're overwhelmingly thankful to God.
And so what are your tips for a long-lasting, successful marriage?
Bill and I have always been passionate about the same things. So we obviously love each other deeply, but we are passionate about serving God, seeing God honoured in our nation and in the world. We share a common mission vision, and we're on the same team, and it works.
Good. And I can't remember what I was going to say, which is very, very like me. That's one of the things that's good in my marriage, in that my wife has a very good memory, where I have a shocking memory most of the time. Before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty, what is your role here at the CI? How did you kind of get involved with it in the first place, and what does a social policy analyst do?
It goes back a long way. Bill and myself were among the earliest supporters of CI when it started 30-something years ago, because we were so delighted to see an organisation stepping into that gap of promoting God's glory in the public square. So we'd been supporters, cheering for it. He was a pastor for 26 years. I was a pastor's wife and involved in women's ministries, and increasingly, as the children grew up, travelling and speaking to women's events in many different countries. And this is where the kind of vision kicked off that would draw me into the work with the Christian Institute. As I travelled, I was hearing stories from so many women and families describing the negative and harmful, disruptive impacts of the ideals of the sexual revolution, radical feminism, effectively saying women should be liberated from men, liberated from the family, liberated from children. And this was having appalling impacts in real lives across countries. And in our own country, I was increasingly disturbed to see the negative ideas behind public policies that actually served to disincentivize stable family formation rather than encourage stable family formation. So a number of years ago, I had an epiphany moment where I thought, I really want to find out what's going on. And I gave up other writing, speaking work and did a PhD in family policy. And my suspicions were all confirmed. Public policy, particularly in England, which I was studying, was undermining family policy. And just as I finished that PhD, David Cameron announced that his government was going to introduce so-called same-sex marriage. And the Coalition for Marriage was started to resist that new idea, which had not been in any of the party mandates, etc. And having heard of the work that I'd been doing in the whole area of family formation, they asked me to be a media spokesperson. So for a couple of years, I was volunteering pretty well full-time for the Coalition for Marriage, but working quite closely with the Christian Institute on that campaign. And so after same-sex marriage was introduced and that campaign moved into a different direction, which is now being led in a very effective way by Tony Rudzinski, I was offered a job with Christian Institute. To be able to carry on the interests I have in areas such as family policy, but in a sense, my bread and butter job here is staff training, which I love because we just continually get together in small seminar groups and work through all of the issues that we campaign on. And we remind ourselves of the source of our beliefs, which is the moral law, creation order, the word of God. but then we work out how that works out in real life and how that applies to the issues that we're dealing with. And so it's giving staff an opportunity to remain on the same page about these issues, but always based on the Word of God.
And so some of that training is key thinkers from from that Christian background and people who've been influential in shaping the way that evangelicals think about this and that. And then you've got people from the other side, you've got those people who are promoting very different, very dangerous ideologies at times. And then, of course, there's bits about different legal cases and things that the CI has been involved with for a long time. And so, I mean, it's an awful lot of stuff that you have to have a very good, a very solid grasp of, and you do a very good job of that.
Well, it's a couple of things there, Angus. Number one, I believe it's a huge privilege working for the Christian Institute. I can't tell you how privileged I feel working for this organisation because I believe in what the Institute is doing. Number two, I actually rather enjoy dipping into lots of different things, a bit of a scattergun approach. But yes, in staff training, we deal with all of the legislation we've ever campaigned on, the people our legal defence team have actually defended over the years. That's really interesting. But also the issues and how they fit in with the biblical worldview, key thinkers, and yes, on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the argument. So it gives me an excuse to read lots of books and then talk about them to other people, which is what I enjoy doing probably most.
We'll kind of come back to people on the other side, the people who are promoting these kind of other ideologies. But in terms of people who've been kind of key in shaping the way that you've been thinking, who do you think has been kind of influential in shaping Sharon?
Okay, well, aside from the Christian Institute, going back a long way, there have been several people, but I remember vividly as a young teenager being taken off on a Christian family event, and I had a limited amount of money at the time, and on the bookstore was a bright orange booklet by somebody called Jonathan Edwards called Heaven, a World of Love, which is rather a lovely title, you've got to admit. So I bought it and I read it, and at age 12, 13, I was just absolutely captivated with the idea of the beauty and the love of God. So that was big in my spiritual life, and Jonathan Edwards has gone on to be a big influence on me. And then moving on, I remember being taken again as a teenager over to Switzerland to visit Le Brie, where, of course, Francis Schaeffer was training students from across Europe in a biblical worldview, but also drawing alongside them in their own problems. And I remember hearing a sermon he preached on forgiveness, and it had a powerful impact on me. But also for Francis Schaeffer, his passion was to see Jesus Christ honoured as Lord of all in all of life. And his writings at that time were very formative on many people in terms of shaping the pro-life movement. And again, from quite a young age, that was impacting me as well. So that's a couple for starters. Jonathan Edwards from something of the past, Schaeffer the more recent past, but two people who've shaped me.
You're very keen on doing the shaping of other people as well. You've got all this tremendous knowledge and you're very keen to kind of pass it on to other people. And so I actually want to go straight into some of our questions. And I think that there's a very pertinent one which would be very helpful for you to answer. So we've actually had a few questions from Philippa, who says that she's enjoying the Faith in Action podcast. So thank you, Philippa. And firstly, she asks, how are the next generation going to become concerned about issues like medical ethics, education, etc.?
I love that question. I love that question because it's a very timely question. I think that right now is the moment that we have to lean into, because the chaos of the sexual revolution and the unravelling of all social norms has led to a situation where many young adults are profoundly concerned about the world they're growing up into and are expressing a readiness to go back to a worldview where there are firm absolutes. And at that point, we lean into that and we say, let us tell you, please, that moral absolutes can only properly come from the Creator God. What right would you or I or anybody else have to say to other people what is absolutely right or absolutely wrong? But God has given us moral absolutes. They are there in the Ten Commandments, which are actually written on every human heart in the form of conscience. So general revelation and special revelation. And so on the, if you like, the non-Christian side, I found it enormously heartening to read a book by a young influencer called Freya India called Girls, where she describes the chaotic, boundary-less world that girls are growing up into and her own conviction that we have to turn back to moral absolutes. And she's done some good podcasts to that effect. But then from the inside, people growing up within the church or Christians from a fairly early age, talking to young adults now, in their 20s maybe, I'm perceiving a greater readiness to embrace the importance of speaking out on pro-life issues, a greater readiness to think about ethical issues than I was perceiving 10, 20 years ago. Because again, I think that they are sensing that only a very coherent and strong response to the chaos of the culture is appropriate. We can't have a laid-back, comfortable, less demanding kind of Christianity. That just is not adequate for the day. And so I'm really excited. I mean, we saw it a little bit in Northern Ireland. We were over there earlier this year. I'm really excited to see young adults, young Christian adults, stepping up to the plate and saying we need to find out what is the reality of what's going on with whatever it may be, artificial reproductive technologies. When you find out it's not great, what's the reality of what's going on about abortion? Do you know, we should say to our neighbours, that babies can now legally be aborted up to birth, which is indescribably barbaric. When people realise, very often they wake up to, but they often don't realise.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation to be in, and far more and more people seem to be very keen to speak out on some of these things. Particularly, I have to say, in regards to abortion, I am seeing far more people on social media who are engaging, who are giving various arguments about why they think it's wrong. And it's not people always from a religious perspective. You know, there are secular groups who are saying, you know, you don't have to be religious to oppose abortion. So even though they don't have that kind of moral absolutism, that they can still recognise that abortion is wrong. And that's, you know, because they have God's moral law written on their hearts.
Yeah, and there's been an overreach, hasn't there? I mean, it was one thing back in the day when some people said, oh, there are these really hard cases and we better have abortion, but it must be safe and legal and rare. Whereas now it's celebrate your abortion, shout out your abortion, you know.
It's crass.
You even
really
have young women jumping up and down screaming, I hate babies. And it's so over the top that I think it revolts many, as you say, people with a conscience. It's gone too far. And the other big thing that's overreached is the whole queering of children, where many people do not like the idea of their daughters going into changing rooms with grown men who believe they're women, and so on and so forth. So I think that overreach in various directions is a moment, Philippa, at which we can be leaning into the need of the moment and encouraging good biblical formation among our Christian young adults so that they are able to offer that tremendously wholesome and beautiful biblical alternative to the chaos that's in our culture.
And another question or another thing from Philippa again is, she says, I'm assuming this podcast is trying to reach younger people. Do you think it's working? And what else is the Christian Institute doing to educate and enthuse those who are under 40? I'll sort of take some of that in that, you know, we are trying to do more. We are trying to do more, particularly on social media. You know, we've seen quite a lot of growth recently. Now I know that, you know, it seems as though pretty much everyone is on social media these days. It's not just kind of that younger generation, but just sort of as an example, TikTok had been our smallest platform, our smallest channel, and our newest one as well. But in the last year, we've grown from something like 250-ish, 250, 300 followers up to about 5,500 in the space of a year. Now, some of that has been, you know, putting effort in, trying new things. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work. But we can't really be taking a great deal of credit for that, because sometimes we've just been completely surprised by the amount of growth, or the things that we didn't necessarily think were going to be particularly popular. Actually, they've been extremely popular, and I think it's really just God's hand has been in that, and that's been it's been amazing to see such growth in such a short amount of time. With regards to the podcast, yes, we've I'm not going to go into all of the analytics, but we have seen that it is a younger audience. There's sort of still a spread, so people of every age category are consuming it, but it does sort of lean more towards the kind of the under 35s, and there's if you take Facebook, which is our largest platform, and we have sort of quite a small group of that younger age category. Actually, with this podcast, it's got a smaller audience at the moment, but it leans far more towards that younger age group. So that's it's encouraging in that regard as well. But yeah, there are other things going on as well. Sharon, I know you're really keen on trying to reach young people, and you mentioned before in Northern Ireland there was this event specifically for young people, and it was the third or the fourth iteration of that event, and I attended it as well. There were 100 or so people turned out, and actually we managed to get some filming, and I'll just play that now for everyone.
Oh, it was really good. Yeah, very informative. Yeah.
Covered a good range of issues, and definitely things that young people want to come up against.
Yeah, really fun event as well, and really good to see so many young people here as well.
It was really great to actually just be in a community of like-minded people, and just hearing the question panel as well was really helpful. All the different views and opinions and stuff was really good.
Be able to ask some, down-to-earth questions to down-to-earth people.
Love to hear about the created order and how important understanding that is so important for all these issues that we face.
Just to be encouraged with the truth of God's word, and how we can have confidence in a world with so many conflicting and confusing ideologies.
I find it very practical, and I really would encourage more people this age to come out.
Yes, so that was that event. Lots of people very kind of encouraged by what was being said. Can you just give us a flavour of what that event was like?
Yeah, hugely energising. So I think it was the fourth or fifth, I can't remember, time I've gone over to Northern Ireland, and it's been a meeting for young adults, and I've talked about worldviews and their consequences, effectively, different angles each time, and our colleague over there, Callum, has spoken as well. And then we've had a Q&A. And the tremendously exciting thing is to see so many young adults who really want to engage with current issues in a way that is faithful, but you get the impression they also are filled with joy and hope themselves, and they would love to share that vision with other people around them. And I think that's where my heart is. There are so many young people not like these ones, who have no hope and no God in the world. And the more your eyes are open to that, the more, wherever you go, you're just looking at these younger people and your heart is going out for them. And you say, I just want these people to have hope and joy. And of course, we can all do what we can in terms of chatting where we can, offering out tracts and gospels. And I found people very receptive to accepting New Testaments and gospels just in the last 6 months. But these youngsters are on the front line. And what I loved was that sense that although there can, for some of them, be a high cost to keeping a clean conscience and speaking out truth, they're up for it. They're up for the challenge, and I praise God for that. So it's a hugely positive thing being with them.
Yeah, really great to hear that. Now that, of course, happened in Northern Ireland. That's was kind of a bespoke event out there. The culture in Northern Ireland is probably a little bit different to what we see in the rest of the UK, really. But it would be great to see more young people turning out just for general CI events. We hold about 300 or so meetings around the UK every year, so there's actually plenty that people could be coming to, and just because something isn't directed specifically at that kind of younger audience doesn't mean that it's not applicable to people. And actually I would say that, just sort of anecdotally, in the last couple of times I've been traveling around the country doing these kind of meetings, that more young people have been turning up at them. So there's definitely a thirst among young people for these. So I would really be encouraging people who are interested, or who think, my child, my grandchild, or younger people at my church, if you think they should be coming along to these events, if you think they should know about these difficult issues and know how to be able to talk about them, you should encourage them to come along to meetings.
Absolutely. I make a point now when I'm doing speaking at different events to actually check with the organisers ahead of time. You are inviting teenagers, aren't you? And it's astonishing how many of them perhaps haven't even thought of that. But I think from experience and even from my own memory, teenage years are very, very impressionable. And when we do get younger people coming out to our CI events, they're really, really engaged. It's just the question of getting them there. So I think church leaders could play a role in that, in making it clear that you could say, young people welcome, come along, come and try it.
Now, that there are a couple of things in the pipeline that we probably can't really say too much about at the moment, but there are things in the pipeline, so be encouraged by that. But one thing that you think is really important, I know you've said it a few times before, is that you want to see young people equipped for the challenges that they're going to face when they go to university, because many universities are very, very liberal. People are separated from the family that they've grown up in. They're going to a place where they don't know any other Christians. They're maybe not part of a church. If you're moving away, you don't necessarily know where the good churches are, where you should be getting stuck in. So for a kind of a teenager going off to university and suddenly not having that support network, you think it's really important for them to actually to have really solid foundations in advance.
I think what needs to be understood by parents, church leaders watching their young people go off to university is, don't underestimate the embedded hostility to the Christian worldview in so many curriculum materials of all the different subjects. The assumption in many of them is that Christianity has been a oppressive and repressive force, because the whole concept of absolute morality is regarded as deeply damaging. And then conversely, the idea that unlimited personal autonomy is a great thing. And that's a challenge. But then also there are all sorts of ideas that young people need to be prepared to confront, saying that we divide society up into different classes that hate each other. And it's patently absurd to, for example, suggest that all women should think all men are toxic oppressors. I mean, the whole thing is very, very divisive. But for young people, being tipped into a situation where everybody seems to think the same thing, and they will be shot down and vilified if they even raise a question about it, it's very scary when it first hits you, which is why it's better to be prepared ahead of time for all of this stuff. I mean, that talk that we mentioned in Northern Ireland, it was simply giving those young adults a basic overview of how current ideas hit up against creation order, and therefore they do not work. And so we do not have to be afraid of ideas that do not work in practice. Bad ideas bear bitter fruit. So I think that better forewarned, better equipped, better prepared. And so this is something that we've tried to do a bit of, and we want to do more of.
And that brings us on actually quite nicely into the next question, which is what books or podcasts would you recommend to somebody who is interested in critical theory?
Now, that's a really good question. I myself, aside from all of the Christian Institute materials, I assume that you are regarding that as a given. I listen to Al Merler's The Briefing every day. I find that a very, very energising perspective on current news and events. Now, obviously, some of it is very heavily tilted towards American concerns, which I find quite interesting. Other people would not. But there are other more international and more general theological questions addressed. I like that. So that's my main go-to. On the particular issue of critical theory, you could perhaps just show up in the programme notes the resources we've put out from Christian Institute on critical theory, because those are accessible in terms of a booklet, a briefing, and a couple of talks.
Now, how can we, this is another question from an anonymous supporter, how can we have positive conversations with friends with whom we disagree on very difficult or controversial issues?
I think that when we profoundly disagree with friends, it may well be about issues that they feel that's an outrageous situation, it will be fixed if we, and then they go down a route that we know is unbiblical. So rather than starting with that route that we know is unbiblical and just having a ding-dong argument, step back, breathe deeply, smile at them, and remember that they're concerned about that thing because they are an image bearer of God, and God has given them a conscience, and that gives them the fire in their bellies to really want to speak out against that injustice. Now, they're coming up with an unbiblical solution to the injustice, but they do have a sense that there's an injustice or a sadness or something that they feel strongly about. If we were just mere accidents of time and chance, if we were just bits of material, you could suggest that we wouldn't get quite so irate about those things. So I think that's the where's our common ground? We are human beings. We share concern about things we don't like. But then, depending on the situation, depending on the issue, depending on the friend, over time you can begin chipping away at where do you get your answers. And very often, when human beings, absent any recognition of God or absolute morality, come up with their own answers, they end up making things worse. Unintentionally, but making things worse. That's why at the Christian Institute, we do not like harm reduction schemes, because they're always well-intentioned, but they end up making the problem worse.
Yeah. I think one reason perhaps that younger people are not wanting to engage in difficult discussions at times is because they're concerned that they're going to lose friends over it. Because there seems to be this idea, certainly propagated in social media, that if you hold a certain view, that you must be a monster. And so then if you are having a conversation with your friend and you mention that actually that's how you feel about things, even if you've been friends with this person for several years, are they going to suddenly just want to cut you off because they think that you are an awful, awful person? How can we encourage Christians to, well, firstly, not feel as though that is the case, but to kind of avoid those kind of really, I mean, there's always going to be some awkwardness, but to avoid a complete shutting down of a relationship?
Well, I think that what you've alluded to is a deeply divided and toxic culture, which actually, lamentably, does often pigeonhole people as toxic if they have the so-called wrong ideas about things. And it's one of the great tragedies of our time that we see, for example, a very large proportion of parents being cut off by their adult children because the parents are supposedly holding the wrong views about politics or anything else. Now, I think that we just have to, as Christians, ourselves believe that we can love and respect every single human being alongside deeply disagreeing with their views. And our conviction is disagreement is not hatred. And we have to bring our children up from the earliest age to know that we can know that certain things are wrong and we disapprove of them, but we always love the people around us, whoever they are, because we're told to love our neighbour. And that is just an absolute given. So it's that training young people in our families, in our churches, to make that distinction. Love the person, but you are able to profoundly disagree with where that person is coming from.
Do you think Christians have a responsibility to always speak up in every circumstance on difficult issues when you know that you're going to disagree with somebody else, you know that there could end up being a bit of a falling out, and even if you go into that thinking, I'm going to try my best to be gracious and find common ground, etc. But do you still just go in thinking, I have to do this because it's the right thing to do, and if I'm rejected, then if that means that the relationship with this friend or a partner or whatever is going to end, do you then just say, well, that's a cross that I will gladly bear?
No, I don't think that it's at all incumbent on us always to speak into every single situation. We'd be insufferable people if we did try to tell everybody what we thought about everything in every given opportunity. I think the non-negotiable for us as followers of the Lord Jesus Christ is not to lie. There's a commandment, you shall not bear false witness. And I think that in today's context for young people, to be a faithful follower of Christ and not to lie is a big ask. And I'm so grateful that there are young people who are brave. But you don't necessarily expect to, in every context, persuade everybody of every wrong opinion that they have got. It can be wiser to not go along with the lies, not lie, but wait your moment for when there is opportunity to say something that will actually have traction. Because we always remember, when we do speak, the desire is that you would take the person with you, even just a tiny bit, or raise a question. It's not just speaking for the sake of keeping a clean conscience or doing our, ticking off a box. It's about the person that we are speaking to and whether there is any conceivable concept of these words doing good in that situation. And in a sense, that's something for Holy Spirit, for wisdom. But we do know that even from a young age, young people can follow Jesus and be led by the Spirit, and we have to encourage them to pray for that wisdom.
Mm. Well, we've covered the questions that we've been asked, and so now it's time for me to start asking my questions. You've been doing an awful lot of stuff recently. You've been incredibly busy with a whole load of different things. Should we talk about the books that you've been working on and talk about them a little bit? Actually, no. Let's start with them. This recent bit of news that the CI was actually able to send your book to parliamentarians. So what was the book? What was the purpose of that? And what did you want it to achieve?
Okay. The book was a book called How Christianity Transformed the World. And it's a short paperback which in 10 short chapters shows the positive impact that living Christianity has had on freedom, justice, religious liberty, dignity of women, education, philanthropy, healthcare, the work ethic, and so on. The positive impact.
What have Christians ever done for us?
Exactly. And it's not just something for the West. This is worldwide. It deliberately picks up on people and stories from many different nations. It's very much, each chapter starts with personal stories because people like to hear about other people, not just issues and topics. But then there's also the evidence that Christianity has had a profoundly transformative impact in those areas, impact for the good. So at a moment culturally where there is something of an openness to learning more about the Christian heritage of our own country, the Christian Institute took the decision to send this fairly accessible and easy to read paperback to parliamentarians in the different nations. And we've had some nice responses of people saying they appreciate it. We really just wanted to say thank you for the work you do in public service. Whether you agree with us or not, we're grateful for the work you do. It's a tough job. Thank you for that. And we would like, as a Christian organisation, to say all best wishes for Easter. At this Easter time, we'd like to give you a small gift. You may find it interesting to read something of the historical impact of Christianity in our nation. And we just left it at that. So we hoped that it would help raise the profile of the tremendously valuable impact that Christianity has had, those things for which we can be grateful.
And you must have sort of a few kind of highlights of things that you think have been particularly impactful. Can I trouble you for one or two that have really sort of inspired you?
Well, I suppose the hot topic of the moment is justice. People are speaking a lot about justice. And I've got a section in the chapter on justice going back to Magna Carta 1215. And I have a chart showing that the major provisions of Magna Carta were all grounded in Scripture. It's fascinating when you look at it. Because, of course, it's a deeply biblical concept that there may be huge variations in status among human beings, but frankly, we are all equal before the judgment of God. We will all answer to God. And then God gives us all his moral law. That's the same law that we will all answer to. And in a nation, God gives authority to the rulers, but he says, don't be impartial. Do be impartial. Don't be partial. It's one law for all. Now, that's a moment for our times that resonates because there's a passionate interest in that concept of justice. And I think that the Bible has that profound realization that if equality of dignity of humans is anything, it's that equality under the law, and we want a justice system that will reflect that.
So these are the good fruits coming from good roots.
Yeah.
But your recent work has been on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah, well, I've been doing a lot of work showing that conversely, when individuals or communities or whole societies adopt worldviews that are based on lies, they can sound seductive to begin with. Unlimited personal autonomy, lovely. But then you try it, appalling impacts in the lives of real people, the lives of communities, and the lives of whole nations. So there was a companion book to How Christianity Transformed the World entitled The Lies We Are Told, The Truth We Must Hold, showing the negative impact of lies. But I build on that in the next book that's coming out in January, God willing, January next year, 27. And this is on creation order over critical theory, basically showing that many of the destructive ideas around in society at the moment are hitting up against the bedrock of God's creation order, and they're not working well. And it's just that, do they work in real life? Actually, not so much. And even non-Christians are seeing that now. So this is a moment that we as Christians lean into and say, there is a better way. If we go with the flow of God's creation order, God's moral law, the results will be a whole load better.
There's been a lot going on in the media. There's a lot of people who think that feminism has it's gone too far, that that men feel very emasculated, men don't know where they stand in the world anymore, and then there's been this pendulum swing towards this toxic masculinity, that women should be subjected, and that men are in control, and that is what men should be striving for, to be in control and to be dominant. And you hear all this talk about alpha males and whatever. And so you've got sort of the two sides of things that, some people are saying, actually, we need to keep promoting feminism because we've had this reaction to it. Where do you kind of stand on all this? It's it's a heated debate.
Yeah, but the point is, Angus, that again, this is precisely the perfect opportunity for us to lean into that and say, when you come at a human problem, relations between the sexes, and you come at it with a perspective shaped really just by experience or your views or your opinions, it's going to go wrong in one of either ways, or actually multiple ways. We need a solid foundation. And the solid foundation is, lo and behold, the Word of God and God's creation order, which says absolute equality for male and female. That's clear in Genesis 1, both made in the image of God, equal in dignity and worth and status. But also, gloriously, Genesis 2, there is significant difference. And we actually demean men and women if we ignore those significant differences. But always it has to be shaped within both being under the moral law of God, which says that we must respect each other, we must care for each other, and it protects against the excesses on both sides that you will run into if you throw out the idea of creation, order and moral law. So we have those guardrails within which to preserve that complementarity which preserves equal status and dignity and significant difference.
So a lot of what you think and that you write about and you talk about is when you follow God's way, things go well. When you depart from that, things don't go so well. And you've been doing a lot of speaking. Really, you've been sort of traveling. Well, I was about to say all around the country, but around Europe, around the world. So you were recently at the Rising Lights, which is, am I right in thinking that that's kind of a new version of Word Alive, because Word Alive used to be on and then they lost their premises, and so now they brought back Rising Lights. And how was that?
Wonderful. So this is a new family Christian event organised by the FIC, but not exclusively for FIC churches. Anyone can go. It's obviously on the biblical basis for Bible believing Christians. Great to see people of all ages from all over the country. Great to see a considerable cohort of younger people there, eager and enthusiastic. And this was a lovely opportunity. I was able to give a seminar track entitled God's Glory, Neighbour's Good. And this was looking at the lives of living Christians who had a tremendous impact for the good, both in their communities and more widely. And I was able to draw together some of my favourite people from church history and pull together the themes of revival experience, because these were people who'd been impacted by revival in their own lives, and missionary vision, because if you are impacted by a revival experience, you then passionately want to see the glory of God in the whole world. And so I was able to look at some of the greats like William Carey, Anne Adnaren Judson, also Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, who should be remembered also as missionaries. They ended up as missionaries on the frontier. And it was great fun. We looked at how if you have that living faith, as the title of this podcast suggests, it will be faith in action. Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a kind of a change in venue, change in location. You had been in Wales for Word Alive. It's now down on South Coast.
Torquay.
Good
What
weather.
could be nicer? Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. English Riviera.
Yeah. And then from the English Riviera to Poland, not very long afterwards for the European Leaders Forum.
Yes.
Who are these European leaders, and what are they all discussing?
This is a tremendous event. It's been going for well over 20 years. And the reality is that Europe is one of the very darkest places spiritually, because we have had a Christian heritage that in many countries has been abandoned or deliberately torn up and thrown away. So it is now spiritually a very challenging continent. But within the many different European nations, there are Bible-believing Christians who are seeking to be faithful, but very often in different nations, they might be quite isolated. So this was a vision to have a place that could draw together evangelical leaders from any or all of the European nations, where they could network and get to know each other and encourage each other. And then mentoring discipleship networks could be set up to encourage people in isolated situations. So when you go to the forum now, there are well over 800 people in a conference centre from the different nations, and there are about 30 different tracks going on where church leaders, leaders of women's ministries, leaders of youth ministries, apologetics people, etc., can meet with people in a similar track of ministry to themselves, encourage one another, and then mentor and disciple each other. And then those relationships can be cultivated over the years. So within that, there's a tremendous amount of teaching going on in different contexts, but it's all recorded, and then the videos and recordings are put up onto a bank of resources that people from all the European nations can access who might not get training. Mm-hmm. So it's a good concept of providing a build-up of resources. So I was asked to go over and give some input into the marriage and family track and give a talk on the current cultural lies about marriage and how we should respond, which dealt with issues relevant across Europe. And then I was also invited to go in and give a talk on protecting our children from the sexual revolution. So these were two challenging topics, but very pertinent, because many of those countries, even if they're quite traditional in their cultures, have from the international level had, for example, very permissive and explicit sex ed imposed on them, or they've had same-sex marriage effectively being pushed in from pressure from the outside. And these people from different countries want to know how to respond to those pressures. So it's a great opportunity to go in and give some teaching on that.
And do you have any more of these kind of engagements lined up in the future, or you've had a glut of them? They're
I've
pretty
had
much
a
done
lot.
for now.
There's been a lot in the last few years. So at the moment, I'm looking forward and thinking it might be really nice just to be able to devote more time up here in Newcastle to what I really love doing, which is the staff training up here.
Well, we would enjoy that.
But also engagements within this country. But who knows? Who knows? We always say, Lord willing, to our diary plans, don't we, Angus?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you've had so much going on. You've got books you're writing. You've got all these speaking engagements. You're wanting to spend more time up in Newcastle training. What is it that is driving you? What is motivating you to carry on this work after such a long time doing it?
My heartbeat is particularly to see younger people, but really any of us, confident that what Jesus Christ offers is good news, not what the world tells us, bad news, oppressive, toxic, bigoted, and so on and so forth. There are so many lies going around at the moment which are doing untold damage, and yet there are answers to those lies. And I really want, as a Christian institute, the Christian Institute to carry on the good work that it has done for many, many years, which is showing that when we follow God's design for our lives, it works, and it's great news for the public square. And we want to go on helping our supporters to being confident in that vision and helping other people to be confident in that vision as well.
Well, Sharon, that is brilliant, and that seems like a very good place for us to end. So thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to everyone who's listened or watched this podcast today. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, let us know in the comments, subscribe. If you have any questions for us, do email us at faithinaction@christian.org.uk. And remember, you can also join the Christian Institute by signing up at the.ci/sign-up. Until next time, goodbye. For more great content, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.